The sea looks like hammered steel. A low sky presses down until the horizon thins to a wire. The water inhales. The water exhales. A black back rises, glistens, and sinks. Then another. Then a small shape that does not move the way it should. She surfaces with the calf balanced on her rostrum. It slides. She lifts. It slides again. She lifts again. The tide pulls sideways and her body writes a dark arc across the gray. Her eye does not close. Her breath is steady and wrong. The others circle without rush. The world is new and already broken. Keep watching. Because this is the story of a mother who refused to surrender her dead newborn for 17 days while ships turned and cameras searched for meaning. It is the story of a coastline that mistook grief for a spectacle, and of a species that carries memory and sound. If you want true animal mysteries told with facts and edge, subscribe now. Tap the bell. What follows will not let you go. The calf arrives at dawn and does not breathe long. A rush, a slip, a silence. The mother nudges the small body up into air that does not help. She keeps nudging. She takes the weight with her face, with the hard curve built for speed and hunting, not for carrying. She tries again. She tries again. The pod keeps their line but slows, a ring that flexes around an absence. Bodies rise and fall without show. The sea tells no one what it owes. The tide changes and she is still there, pushing the calf as the current turns. A research skiff holds the proper distance and drifts. No words carry. Only the small movements of people who understand that to be near is not the same as to help. A hydrophone trails and hears the sound of breath arranged into energy. Distant calls. Pulse patterns that keep a family's shape intact in a wide moving room. Light returns as if nothing important happened. The mother's skin shows the first rasp where calf and wave grind against her. She still lifts, still corrects to keep the body above the line where air meets water and nothing at all meets physics. If she were human, someone would remove the weight, say enough, insist on mercy. She is not human. She is built for a longer argument. The pod adjusts. Two females take flanks and match speeds. The tall male holds off to the seaward side like a wall introduced into a story about wind. The calf's white face turns toward air, unseeing, obedient to the geometry she forces on it. A camera on a bluff records a sequence that looks like love and is, but not the kind sold in cards. It is insistence. It is refusal. It is grief worked like a muscle until the body learns a movement it did not need before. The morning looks cleaner. The water moves like glass taught to breathe. The mother corrects for chop with handless precision. A boat approaches and then does not. A law remembered late but not too late. The pod keeps to their route along the shelf where salmon used to run thick enough for stories with easy endings. A scientist writes notes and counts the intervals between breaths until the intervals become their own sentence. A child watches through borrowed binoculars and learns that patience can hurt. A ferry slows, a tug does not. The sea accepts all of it and stays bigger than fairness. Wind makes a low scroll across the surface and the calf slips more often. The mother dives to retrieve and pushes back into position with speed that steals air. The others give her space to fail and space to try. They are not a committee. They are a pattern found inside moving water. They are family and function at once. The news uses words like vigil and unbearable and astonishing. The words are for people on land. At sea there is only work and a body refusing to let go of what the world ended too soon. Someone posts a clip. Someone makes a headline. The pod surfaces and sinks and does not read it. The route bends south along an island with pines that throw long shadows onto the tide. The mother keeps her station and invents a position in the water that was not meant to hold anything this way this long. A female shifts in and braces the calf for a short stretch, a relay inside a map created by breath. The calf slides. The mother takes it back. The female moves off and breathes, then returns to take her place again. On shore, a woman cries without sound and does not notice until the salt reaches her lips. A man who has never cared for whales cares now and does not know where to put that. A ranger points at a sign that says, "Give them distance," and pretends not to see the drone crouching low behind grasses farther down the bluff. The calf's skin shows wear. The mother's skin shows resolve. The line between the two is a ledger. A skiff runs too close and the mother darts, the calf slips, the pod shifts mass like a muscle guarding a wound. The skiff leaves a wake that fades into a long apology the ocean accepts without forgiving. A fisherman on the outer bar bends his head at the sight and then bends it again toward his gear. Salmon are thinner this year than promise. He knows why and says nothing to the wind that knows more. A container ship blows a body of water out of its way without noticing. The orcas move through the boundary left behind. The world arrives in vans and on ferries. Phones rise like a field of dark flowers wherever a rumor of sighting lands. The mother does not slow for an audience. She does not speed up for one either. She chooses direction as if pulled by a thread only she can feel. A man with a notebook and a government badge writes distances into the day. A woman with a scope and a worn hat draws each surfacing like a plot point and understands that plot has nothing to do with it. A crew north of here records calls that sound like patience and containment and a scaffolding of sound into which grief fits like a beam. None of it brings the calf back. All of it keeps the mother from falling into a kind of silence that swallows. A storm thinks about the islands and then changes its mind. The pressure rises. The sea flattens to something like a held breath. The calf finally sinks too deep for a moment. The mother dives and returns it from green to gray. Her breaths come faster for a while and then steady. Two juveniles line up behind her and draft, learning a movement they will never need as mothers if the world behaves, but learning it anyway because the world does not. A line from a study comes back to a scientist as she listens through headphones that smell faintly of salt. Long-term social memory. Vocal learning. Maternal investment. The words collapse under the weight of watching a body lift another body inch by inch over miles that were never supposed to be measured this way. Chinook salmon are stories this season more than fish. The pods that depend on them adjust by needing more water for each mouthful of energy. The mother burns energy to carry what cannot feed her. People say love again. People are not wrong. People are not entirely right either. This is love harnessed to a system. This is grief disciplined into movement. A child asks what will happen, and an adult says something about cycles and nature, and does not say the part about dams and noise and heat. The child watches the orca's back cut a perfect arc and imagines black marble. The child will feel different near water for the rest of a life. The relay becomes visible even to people who do not know how to see. A sister or cousin takes a turn, and then the mother returns with a precision that looks like choreography. It is not staging, it is distributed labor. It is behavior scaled to a loss too large for one body to carry alone. The press calls the pod a clan and a nation and a tribe. The press is hungry the way an ocean is hungry. It eats what you throw and asks for more. The pod eats what it can catch. The mother does not eat enough. She refuses some chances because the calf will slip if she speeds. On a ridge, someone counts vessels. On another ridge, someone counts breaths. In a lab, someone counts decibels and the amount of engine noise that covers hunting calls at particular distances and currents. Numbers wobble inside sound. The anti-vibration mounts help. The slowdown orders help. The new prop design helps. The calf does not know any of this, and the mother would not care if she could. She is making the world smaller to keep a single thing inside it. Time is a rope made of hours. The mother hauls. The rope frays. The pod hems in the space around her so she can do the work without being forced to argue with gravity more than necessary. A small swell lifts them and sets them down like punctuation in a sentence that is too long but still must be read. Hydrophones record a run of calls that resemble the family Ace older dialect and then duck into silence for a while that feels like a room where everyone holds breath at once. The calls resume in a pattern that looks, on paper, like scaffolding. Scientists restrain the urge to promise a narrative. The narrative restrains no one on land. A documentary team arrives and resents the fog because fog resists shots that explain everything. The fog does not care how badly anyone needs to be clear. The mother still carries. A tug drags a barge down the channel and pulls a wall of water around a corner. The pod falls away and regroups, the mother still lifting, the calf still without weight of its own. A bald eagle follows and then stops when the current fails to turn up anything easy. Another orca probes a kelp bed and leaves it alone. Life continues to insist on itself all the way around this grief. On the ferry, a man refreshes a website that tracks sightings and thinks about leaving his car to go to the rail. He stays seated. The cars vibrate in sympathy with 1,000 mechanical choices up in the wheelhouse. A girl 2 rows up has a pamphlet with a whale on the front and the words "How to Watch Responsibly" in a font that looks kind on purpose. She keeps her place in it with a ticket stub. The mother's back shows abrasions where the calf's body has been riding. The slippage becomes more frequent. The retrieval dives take longer. When she surfaces, the exhale keeps a line to the sky as if drawing a record for whoever will count this later. She turns toward the open water and then toward land, and then chooses neither because choice would mean making the world smaller in a way that would break something that still holds. An old fisherman admits to no one that he is praying. He does not use the word. He tiptoes in his own mind around the idea that a thing built for hunting is teaching him a kind of devotion, and laughs at himself without making a sound. He checks his engine again and tells the younger man tying up 2 slips down to idle, until he is past the point that pulls, because sometimes it is the water that makes your choices for you, and sometimes it is loudness. Wind returns with an edge. The current strengthens as if a hand tightened on a belt. The mother adjusts and takes the calf's limp body into the headwind. The wake behind her looks like handwriting in a language that requires patience and clean attention. The pod offers the relay again. She declines. The movement grows more precise. The movement grows more costly. On land, the world argues about what to call this. Grief, ritual, behavior, anthropomorphism. The word that matters is endurance. It does not translate well onto screens. It is felt, not framed. It is a burn held in a constant line until it becomes normal to hurt. At a lab, a scientist draws a line graph that no one on television will want. It shows prey decline over decades. It shows vessel noise. It shows the energy budget of an animal that cannot eat photographs. The graph is too honest to go viral. The mother keeps the calf for another day. She moves slowly along the border between deep and shelf. The juveniles practice being calm. The old female stays on the outside and makes small corrections to everyone else, as positions with her body the way elders organize rooms without moving furniture. The calf slips, and the mother dives and returns and resumes. Boats obey the distance because too many eyes are watching. Phones stay down for once because the fog refuses to allow proof. The watchers on shore learn to watch with stillness. This is not entertainment. This is instruction delivered without kindness and without malice. The world begins to wonder how the story will end. People set up expectations the way they set up chairs. They imagine a release time to their presence. They imagine a moment they can own. The sea has no interest in being cooperative to human schedule. The mother reignites a streak of speed for 2 breaths and gets alongside a patch of kelp. For 10 minutes she moves as if the calf weighs nothing at all. Then the current takes over again and the weight returns. A juvenile slips into position behind her and drafts the unweight, learning, imitating, recording. A woman on the bluff thinks about her own loss and feels something heavy that is also useful shift into place. She will not name it. She will carry it the way a tide carries a smell through town. People will notice without knowing what they notice. The mother still carries. Dawn reveals a surface as clean as a sheet signed by a storm and ironed by a long night. The mother surfaces without the calf. She circles once in a tight arc and then does not circle again. The pod holds formation and then opens for her. She breathes. She turns outward. She disappears down a line that belongs to the old routes that used to guarantee food. There is no ritual anyone at shore understands. There is no ceremony anyone at sea performs for people with cameras. There is only a re-entry into the system that demanded the carrying in the first place. Loss returned to depth. Love turned back into labor. A task completed not because anyone wanted it to end, but because systems and bodies eventually enforce their own limits. The headlines run out of verbs. The cameras go where cameras always go next. The ferry schedule does not care. The research skiff goes quiet and maintains gear. The law adds a paragraph and shifts a fine. The whale-watching boats add a line to their safety talk and mean it. A drone is confiscated and then returned. The harbor smells like fish and diesel and clouds that need to empty themselves. The pod hunts. The mother misses 2 lunges and then lands 1. The tail slaps are sharp enough to read as punctuation. A calf born to another female surfaces and disappears without hesitation. Life does not apologize for happening near loss. It repeats in a way that does not ask permission. A girl who stood on the bluff with a pamphlet buys a used field guide from a store that has been closing for years and never closes. She learns what a saddle patch is. She learns why the dorsal on the males is tall and straight. She writes distances on her hand in pen and tells her father that 300 yards is not a suggestion. He listens because children see the future more clearly than maps. A scientist sleeps for 12 hours and then wakes with the sound of a call in her head. She realizes it is not a call. It is a pattern. It is structure that carried a family through an event. It is sound as architecture. She writes a line in a paper and deletes it because it is too clean. She writes a messier line. She keeps it. A fisherman takes up his net slower at the mouth of a river and curses a seal with less energy than a month ago. He still curses. He also idles a little longer past a certain point that he cannot explain. He will never explain it. He will do it anyway. A child in a classroom 1,000 miles from this sea sees a clip without music and keeps the quiet in it. The teacher says nothing for 15 seconds. The children hold still for 15 seconds. The world keeps moving around them and does not care that they learned something. It will care later when they act. What happened was not myth. A southern resident killer whale carried her dead calf for 17 days and covered a distance that can be measured on maps while the world watched. The behavior is documented in other cetaceans. It is not fantasy. It is also not simple. It is not performance. It is not for us. It is an internal accounting performed by a body with big lungs and a better memory than ours. Why did it happen? Not an answer you can hold like a shell. Biology does not often give you those. Maternal bonding in a species that relies on years of learning. Social structure that reinforces the bond. Scarcity that increases the value of each calf. Noise that complicates foraging. Heat that complicates rivers. Dams that complicate runs. It all stacks. The result is behavior at the edge of what energy budgets allow. We saw the edge and filmed it. The ocean kept the cost. The world learned what it always learns from spectacle. It learned to feel. That matters. Feeling begets action sometimes. Often it does not. The work lives not in tears or clicks but in distances held and engines quieted and habitat that grows instead of shrinking by excuses. In cold rivers made colder by choices. In runs rebuilt by engineering and by the humility to remove, not just to build. Respect measured in yards and in silence. 300 is a floor, not a ceiling. Helmets are for heads. Distance is for whales. Shift your wake away from the line they travel. Buy time by slowing down. Refuse the grab for a better angle if the angle costs energy to an animal that owes you nothing. Name the causes and do not hide behind language that sounds polite. Salmon runs need cold water and passages. Noise is a pollutant. Heat is not abstract. Plastic cuts and wraps and takes. Enforcement without resources is a slogan. Funding without follow-through is a performance. Ask for more than mottos. Ask for water you would drink and rivers that move like language spoken by someone who still knows how to pronounce their own name. Practice boredom as a virtue when you watch. The best encounter is distance. The second best is absence. Learn to love a fin at the extent of your seeing. Learn to be satisfied with a surface and a breath and a vanishing line. Make habit your activism. Teach it to the new people who arrive with eagerness and ignorance mixed in the same cup. They did not invent either. They do not deserve contempt. They deserve instruction and a hand pointing away from harm. A mother alone for a moment on flat water. The sky is low. The green coast folds in and out of itself like a tired fan. She breathes. She dips. She moves in a line that you cannot own. There is no score, no narrator, no applause. Only a body that endured a task until endurance reached its limit, and then returned to the work of staying alive another day in a system that makes that harder than it should be. The world will tell this story a dozen ways and forget it 100 more times. The sea will keep its own version and will never share it. What we carry from it is simple. Do less harm. Make space. Love in ways that cost you something and feed the future more than your image of yourself. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Tap the bell. Like the video, so this caution reaches people who still think the ocean is a backdrop. Share it with someone who would step closer when the right move is to step back. We tell these not because whales need our words, but because we need their distance to teach us how to live. The sea remembers. Do not make it remind you like this again. Night turns the channel into a corridor without walls. The surface reflects nothing and keeps everything. The mother moves by memory and by sound that bounces softly from shoreline to kelp to rock. The calf rides where it can. The relay thins while the world sleeps. A juvenile drifts in the lee of her wake and learns how to be quiet without being still. Above them the towns dim to islands of yellow. Below them the seafloor heaves with old work, sand shifted by storms, boulders that remember glaciers, eelgrass that knows how to hold and how to let go. The sea does not mark hours. It marks events. Night is just another pressure on the ledger she is paying down. Night gives her cover from engines and from the sudden intentions of people. It does not give her rest. Breath keeps time. Every surfacing redraws the map. The route becomes a chain of spots where the body rises and the air refills and the ache in every muscle postpones its vote. The pod keeps shape in the dark with sound that travels far and with trust that travels farther. A form moves where the mother moves. Family calibrates to her pace, her path, her refusal. A calf that will not swim still draws the group into a new formation, a new set of rules. This is culture written in motion. Shoreline stores watchers the way a reef stores fish. Each cove holds a cluster of arrivals. Seniors leaning on rails. Kids in hoodies with eyes that catch everything. Guides pointing with calm hands at wake lines and flukes, and the subtler signs a casual glance misses. Someone who has seen too many seasons to be shocked by anything stands apart and watches for mistakes on land rather than miracles at sea. The viewing becomes its own organism with guardrails you can feel but not see. The world brings its habits here. Urgency, comparison, a need to own the moment. The coast insists on different habits. Slowness, deference, the humility to let the scene exist without your outline pressed over it. Volunteers learn to say the same sentence 100 ways. Farther back, slower, let her pass. Some listeners hear the line as control. Others hear it as mercy. The mother hears none of it and pushes water into shape around what she cannot release. The pod moves through a soundscape that looks like a storm on a spectrogram even on clear days. Low engine hum. Propeller cavitation that whistles like torn metal. The sharp, intermittent clicks of sonar that trespass from another task. Within this, the whales compose their own signal. Pulsed calls that identify. Whistles that request or reassure. Click trains that paint the world with echoes invisible but exact. The mother's work must fit inside this noise. To carry is to fight drag. To carry is to surrender speed. To carry is to recalculate every breath against a budget that already ran tight before this grief arrived. The relay becomes more than kindness. It becomes engineering. One female shelters the calf against the mother's head through chop. Another draws the wake into a shield that keeps small waves from knocking loose what should not be riding. The eldest holds a perimeter where curiosity will be intercepted and corrected before it begins to matter. Each role emerges from experience. The ocean records the outcome, not the plan. A calf is calories not taken. The hours add up in the mother's body like numbers etched into a blade. Foraging dives shrink. Success rates fall. She will burn what reserves she kept for nursing to keep the calf above the line. Fat becomes heat, becomes motion, becomes the new normal. The body knows this math at a level deeper than decision. It spends anyway. The pod shores up the deficit with strategy, not charity. Strategy is cheaper than sentiment. It buys survival for the group while grief spends on the one. The ledger is not moral, it is practical, but the form it takes in the water carries the shape of love. Each time the calf slides, the mother corrects. Each correction is energy burned for no return. Each burned unit is chosen. The definition of devotion is not feeling. It is chosen cost. A web of eyes and instruments draws around the route. Hydrophones listen from fixed points. Vessels hold speed under orders that used to be guidelines. Kayaks cluster where the coast creates amphitheaters of sound. Radios gossip in the code of professionals trying not to speculate. Drones try to take to the air and are told no. The no becomes a lesson. The lesson becomes a habit. Reports move at the pace of reception bars. Some accounts are wrong and kind. Others are right and thin. The aggregator sites make a chorus of fragments. The scientific notes remain slow and stubborn. They hold to timestamps and bearing and sea state and the specific curve of a dorsal. The difference between public narrative and field log could fill a channel and always has. The whales move through both as if neither existed. The story does not start at the shoreline. It starts upriver where cold used to last longer. Dams slowed water that once sprinted. Heat settled into the places where finger-length fish needed to become hand-length fish. Logging cut shade that used to lower temperatures by degrees that matter more than headlines. Agriculture and pavement made a currency of what used to move for free. Salmon went from a flood to a schedule. A schedule is brittle. A flood is resilient. Resilience transfers up the food chain. Brittleness does too. Each Chinook that fails to reach the ocean is a subtraction you can feel in a mother's body years later. Each run that moves from abundance to scarcity adds pressure to every choice a pod makes. Scarcity asks for perfection over and over until something breaks. Perfection is not available at scale in a world that refuses to lower noise and raise cold. The calf's short life intersects with this ledger even if its death belongs to a different page. The mother's endurance intersects with all of it. News crews drive north with batteries and the wrong shoes. They ask for quotes and print facts, and then soften them with words that wrap grief too snugly. They are not villains, they are speed embodied. The whales are patience embodied. The mismatch is structural. It cannot be fixed by craft. It can only be bridged by a new kind of attention. The kind that looks without harvesting. The kind that leaves without taking more than memory. Viewers bring their own losses to the footage. Parents see a shape they know too well. Those without children see fidelity and wonder what it would cost them to carry anything for that long. Activists see the structure and try to pry it open with leverage. The cynical see sentiment and shrug. The sea keeps an index of none of this. It counts fish. It counts breaths. It counts days without ceremony. The shop adds prop guards to rentals because a prop guard solves problems before they become YouTube. The ranger's speech gets shorter. The ferry records a longer slowdown waypoints list and sticks to it even when schedules groan. A high school teacher assigns a project that requires no poster board and lots of walking. The brewery prints a new coaster. Distance is love. A fisherman replaces a part early because the part fails early when wake matters more. These changes read like nothings when isolated. Together they make noise a bit softer, wakes a bit lower, routes a bit saner. They reduce the number of moments where choice meets crisis. The mother benefits without knowing. The calf does not. The future calves might. That is how responsible work often feels. Late for one, right on time for the next. By day 11, people assume the end. They are honest about that assumption or they whisper around it. By day 12, the assumption becomes an ache. It settles in observers who cannot change outcomes. The mother changes nothing either. She only repeats. Repetition is a kind of commitment that modern life rarely demands without reward. Watching her do it fractures something and mends something else at the same time. The relay matures into skill. The movement becomes symmetrical. The pod anticipates cross-chop and adjusts before the mother needs to compensate. Juveniles learn the silence that comes before a shift. Older females apportion their own rest so the relay never fails when the mother dives. A team is visible where outsiders thought there was only a star. The matriarchal logic shows itself without performance. This is what culture looks like in a species that speaks in clicks and lives on breath. Weekly life hums, phones ping, roads fill, schedules enforce. Out here, when watchers keep quiet long enough, a hidden thing happens. The whales draw closer to the work they would do if no one watched. Prey calculates poorly and is caught. Calves shadow elders and learn small efficiencies that make large survival. The line between observation and interference becomes a bright wire when silence holds. It is a simple fact. It is hard to sell. It makes no footage. It makes success. A trend emerges at the bluff. Fewer cheers, fewer groans. People catch themselves before narrating. A ranger notes the change and writes the first line of a report that may never be published but may guide policy in a room that will never see the mother who is still carrying. Policy grows in odd soils and occasionally in good ones. Ethics grows in the body first. The end begins when the sea is boring. No wind, no drama, just motion in long sheets. The mother surfaces without the calf. She does not call where humans can hear. She does not perform anything for any camera. She makes a tight circle and then straightens and leaves at a speed the pod matches without argument. The work is over. A different work resumes. There is relief among some on shore. There is grief among others. There is a small pride in a few for having watched correctly, which is a tempting sin the coast forgives when it can. The correct response requires no posture. Leave space. Make less noise. Do the line items that accumulate into a future. The story leaves the news quickly because all stories do. The changes it nudged persist because the system on shore learned a little humility. Extra lines replace fancy narrations. Speed limits stay even in good weather. Vendors stop selling the promise of closeness and sell the promise of witness instead. Smaller profits arrive paired with cleaner conscience. The calculus shifts. Not enough yet. Enough to count. Kids who watched once ask harder questions later. Why are the rivers hot? Why does the cargo come so close? Why were the runs better before anyone in the room was born? Answers fill a whiteboard with arrows and numbers and words that sit in the throat like stone. Teacher and student shoulder that stone together and carry it into the next assignment. That is a form of relay. If it holds, the relay will outlast the clip that started it. The scientist builds the paper later with too many caveats to please the hungry and too few to satisfy the fearful. It says what is known. It leaves unknowns whole. It refuses the temptation to fix mystery with metaphor. The study will be cited and misread and cited again. It will not alter hearts on its own. It will anchor those hearts when they wobble under sentiment. That is its work, and it is good work. Climate shifts. Rivers hold heat. Snow lines retreat up slopes. Spawning beds see silt instead of pebbles. Smolt encounter temperatures that convert possibility into struggle. Each year compresses options for everything that eats fish. Management responds with plans that begin in meetings and struggle to leave them. Some do, some don't. A pipeline of intentions meets a landscape that resists administration. The work is to make more plans become action than slogans. A single mother in a single pod carried a single calf for 17 days. The vastness of that compression is a lock that demands more keys than empathy. The keys have names and bills and budgets. Remove, restore, reduce, replant, retire, realign. They are not poetry. They are decisive and dull. They are what love looks like in policy when you have to choose between applause and outcomes. Choose outcomes. The sea will not clap. It will permit more breath. Distance takes practice the way any discipline does. Captains draw personal lines that exceed legal ones. Kayakers learn to read the sudden heave in water that means a body rising. Photographers practice restraint and discover that the best image includes the space that matters. Watchers accept that the truest record is not the closest shot. The new habit immunizes a culture against its worst reflexes. It protects a future encounter before that encounter exists. A town that learns distance learns a new identity. It tells stories differently. It markets slowly. It attracts visitors who can be taught. It flushes others out to places better suited for them. What remains benefits from the absence of urgency. Urgency makes poor neighbors of good people. The whales do not adjust for us. We adjust for them, or we do not get to watch the work they were always going to do without us. Culture in orcas is not a metaphor. It is measurable. Dialect. Foraging strategy. Route inheritance. Calves acquire the tool set by shadowing elders through years that would unwind most human attention. A mother who carried teaches even in grief. Stamina. Formation. The discipline of holding shape under distorted conditions. Calves that watched will not need that lesson directly. They will need the muscle it built. Suffering becomes a teacher only because everything becomes a teacher when survival hangs. Memory in humans is shorter. It prefers climax and conclusion. It deflates when the end is quiet. The correct antidote is practice. Remember deliberately. Teach the next cohort what distance felt like and why it mattered. Make policies that codify restraint before fashion turns. The world will look away. The coast cannot. The whales will not know the difference if you succeed. That is the point. Hold 300 yards minimum. Hold more when you can. Idle before you think you should. Let wake soften. Cut the engine when the pod's route intersects yours. Reverse only after checking for bodies behind. Keep drones grounded. Anchor at the edges of known paths. Keep voices low. Keep excitement for later when distance restores your breath. Measure your success by the lack of reaction from the animals you came to witness. If you are tempted to perform, take a breath and aim the performance at your own discipline. Impress the people in your boat by doing less. Teach the child with you by modeling silence that contains respect. A quiet minute near a moving ocean will do more work on a human brain than any lecture. Make more quiet minutes and count them as victories. A mother's back whose skin bears new marks. A gray surface that gives nothing for free. A horizon line that shifts by inches and still moves the heart. The calf gone. The pod aligned. The route turning outward toward deeper water where all the work will happen without screens. You will not see the rest. That is the correct size for your role. The part you get is the memory of having stood still while something larger than your need to be involved did what it was built to do. Carry this forward. Not as sadness, as a design principle for how to live near wild things. Make less noise, take less space, spend more on maintenance and less on moments. The ocean will not thank you. It will simply hold more life that does not require you at all. If this held you from the first breath to the last line, stay with us. Subscribe for stories told with care and constraint. Like this video so distance becomes normal and spectacle grows rarer where it should. Share it with the person who loves whales and the person who loves being close to things. Give them both a new habit. Remind them, the sea remembers. We should not need to be reminded this way again. Noise hides because it is everywhere. It blends into expectation, but it stacks. A single fast hull adds a slice. 10 add a wall. Underwater, this wall spreads and scatters until echolocation returns a muddied map. Imagine walking through a city where the streets redraw every time a bus passes. That is what a pod faces on a Saturday in summer. Collision risks climb. Foraging fails more often. The margin for raising calves thins. Slowdowns help. Prop changes help. Routing around known corridors helps. Enforcement helps most because the minority that ignores rules in a loud way consumes the discipline of the many. This is unromantic. It is true. The mother's 17 days happened within a soundscape that we own. The next mother's 17 days will happen inside the one we design now. Repair looks like small acts repeated until they become a structure. Remove derelict nets. Replace culverts that pinch a stream's throat. Shade a creek that forgot what cool felt like. Pull a dam where a dam no longer serves, and negotiate the politics that always arrive when concrete meets memory. Buy back floodplains where houses should never have been built. Let rivers misbehave as they were designed to. Flood is not failure, it is a function. Salmon recognize function. Orcas recognize salmon. This chain Repair also looks like culture. A shop refuses to rent kayaks on certain tides because those tides lure novices into mistakes. A captain builds in a briefing that centers humility, not heroics. A photographer shifts to longer lenses and stops rewarding closeness with sales. Money moves without glamour. Pride collects in fewer accidents. The mother of the future receives this as room, not gratitude. Room becomes grace at scale. Other coasts watched. Scotland, Norway, New Zealand, Patagonia. Each had a version of watchers learning restraint. Each had a parallel story about fisheries and heat, and the dangers of loving a clip more than a creature. A pattern circulated. Grief turns attention. Attention turns policy. Policy turns slowly until impatience either drives action or collapses. The places that acted faster shared traits. Strong local science, empowered enforcement, cultural pride that could be recruited to protect, not to. The sea is one system with different dialects. A choice in the Salish Sea moves a pressure point in the North Pacific. A dam decommissioned here speaks to a law written there. The mother's story became shorthand in meetings far from her home. A tale without villains played in rooms that prefer villains. It worked anyway because the images refused to argue. They simply were. Children measure themselves against edges. The ocean is an edge that instructs without scolding. A 12-year-old watches the 17 days and learns that love is duration and shape, not volume. A 9-year-old learns to read tide tables like secret code. A 17-year-old signs up for a program that teaches water safety and comes home with a new cadence to their steps. Olders learn from them. Families change routes on small vacations. Vacations no longer ignore the places they occupy. A class adopts a creek. They test temperature and pH. They plant willow for shade and pick lost plastic from gravel. The numbers look small. The numbers teach scale. The children learn the math of restoration and the patience of seasons. When someone says it does not matter, they show a chart and a photo from last year and make a case. The creek moves the way evidence moves when paired with insistence. Keep minimum distance and make it a personal maximum. Idle early. Assume whales and be pleased when you were simply careful for nothing. Call in violations. Anonymous is acceptable. Silence is not. Learn the corridor maps and stay out of them when pods transit. Support dam removals where science outruns nostalgia. Fund receivers and staff to read them. Data not gathered is policy not made. Back enforcement with budgets, not slogans. Replace heroism with maintenance. Teach every newcomer how to watch. Remember that a future calf you will never see is the beneficiary of every boring choice you make this weekend. Sometimes pods will fail even when we do everything right. Ice will move. Heat will spike. Disease will thread through a population that cannot distance. A ship will miss a slowdown in fog for reasons that are not evil and still cut a path that injures. The work then is to be honest and fast. To respond without theatrics. To mend with policy and not only with mourning. Mourning is private. Policy is public. Give both their place and do not confuse the two. The mother's 17 days do not guarantee anything. They revealed a capacity that was always there and a fragility we helped create. If we respond by seeking only moments that feel the same, we will hurt the animals we claim to love. If we respond by building conditions where such endurance is never required for grief, we will have honored the lesson. That is the distance between consumption and comprehension. Dusk flattens color and deepens texture. The kelp beds lie like dark handwriting close to shore. The tide folds sandbars into shapes that invite mistakes. Harbor seals surface like punctuation marks at the end of quiet sentences. A heron holds a position that looks like patience and is hunger distilled. Boats head in with lights that smear in water as they cross wakes. The ferry slides past with a weight that writes its own law on every molecule around it. Out beyond all of that, the pod aligns on a contour only they can feel. The mother takes a line that leans toward older water. The juveniles learn the places where the bottom shelves and the prey schools forget how to multiply their luck. The matriarch, if she is alive, keeps track of how long the group can afford to hunt and where. Decision lives in her somatic memory. The others relax into that memory like a song told well. You stand on the bluff and feel the urge to narrate the scene for the person next to you. You do not. You watch without harvesting. You let the work happen without your name attached. You take your hand off your phone. You breathe in time with water for a minute and discover a pressure you did not know had been there. It drains. It leaves logic behind. Logic is sturdier than awe. Awe fades. Logic instructs. The sea is not sentimental. It is exact. It will give you moments that feel like gifts and then take them back before you finish telling the story. What remains is your practice. Do not trade practice for performance. The Mother's 17 days are not a brand. They are a ledger entry against us and a blueprint for better. If you carry anything from this, carry the willingness to be the least interesting thing in the vicinity of a whale. Subscribe if you want more stories told at the speed of respect. Like the video so the algorithm, indifferent as tide, moves caution into places it rarely reaches. Share this with a friend who loves animals loudly and teach them to love them quietly. The sea remembers. Make sure the next thing it remembers about us is distance, not demand. The story lingers the way salt lingers after rain. It stays under the skin and alters how your hands move near water. You find yourself stepping back before anyone asks. You slow without calculation. You keep the urge to explain on a tighter leash. You understand that attention can be generous or predatory, and that the difference is where you stand while you feel it. You remember the shape of the calf riding low and the mother correcting with emotion that cost her. You remember the silence that settled on shore when watchers finally learned how to watch. You remember the small changes that made no noise and remade routes. You remember the way grief turned to endurance without spectacle. You remember that endurance can be a teacher if you let it. You understand at last that distance is not absence. Distance is respect shaped into space. You carry that into ordinary days. You idle your own small life around the wildness you do not own. You ask fewer favors of the coast and offer more room instead. You learn to love the gap between you and the thing you want to be closer to. You come to prefer it because it lets the thing remain itself. This is not restraint as deprivation. It is restraint as design. It is a way to stop needing proof from the world and start granting permission to it. If the future is kind, it will not hand us another 17 days like these. If the future is kind, it will feel boring the way healthy systems feel boring, stable, repeating, full of unspectacular breaths. The right kind of boredom is a privilege. It is the sound of risk lowered and capacity restored. It is a ferry slowing because it should, and a boat choosing to wait because waiting harms nothing and saves something invisible. It is a river colder by a few degrees that nobody posts about, and a run thick. The ending here is not an ending. It is instruction. Do less harm, make more room, trade angles for outcomes. Treat the ocean like a neighbor whose windows are lit, whose routines are old, whose boundaries are clear even when unmarked. Live so that your presence never turns memory into labor for anything that breathes. Choose to be unimportant in the vicinity of importance. Leave with nothing but a story that taught you how to leave. If this changed how you see, subscribe for more stories told at the speed of respect. Like the video so caution travels farther than attention spans. Share it with someone who loves the ocean and with someone who loves being close to things. Give them distance. Give them time. The sea remembers. We should let it remember us for the silences we kept.